Good morning, everybody. How we doing? Yeah, so glad that you are here. Selah and Lathan, both of you getting baptized the last 2 years at Church of the Beach. So proud of you. What an incredible day. You do not want to miss next Sunday. But today I'm excited. We are wrapping up the series we've been in this whole month called Permission Slips. So kids, since you're in the room, how many of you have gone back to school in the last week or two? Yeah, how you feeling about it? Parents, same question. How you feeling about it? Yeah! John Baptiste is just coming out singing freedom. If you have gone back to school, kiddos, how many of you have you gotten the emails? Your parents, you've gotten the emails. Got any fun field trips you're going on this year? Anyone going anywhere cool? Yeah? Stella, where are you going this year? BizTown. Big time. Yes, where are you going? Sacramento. You're going to need a big permission slip for that one. Yeah, Pablo. Catalina, how awesome. So fun, right? So if you're going on a field trip, you're going somewhere cool, what do you need before, I kind of gave it away, but what do you need before you go on those trips? Yeah, a permission slip, that's right, and maybe also a parent or guardian and a large check. But for the point of this message, right, this series we've been in is called Permission Slips because when you go somewhere fun in school, it's off campus, out of the ordinary, you often have to have a permission slip. And for many of us in our lives, kids, not just for you, but also for us adults, we feel like we have to still get a permission slip to live an extraordinary life. And yet what we see throughout the scriptures is that Jesus actually not only invites us into an extraordinary life, but promises that when we follow him, we get to live an extraordinary life. And so we've talked about it the last couple weeks, and today we want to get really, really practical about how to actually take steps towards the purpose that God has for your life, towards the dream God has for you, the direction he has for your life, the things that he already sees in your future that you're maybe hoping for or working towards, right, praying for, that God already exists and is wooing you towards that future, right? And we've talked about how for so many of us, especially maybe if we have an experience in church, we've been taught that we have to play small and we don't want to do it wrong or miss God's will. And it's always been this space of limitation. And yet what we see throughout the scriptures is that Jesus says, I have come so that you might have life to the fullest, that you and I are actually invited to actually play an incredible part in the mission of God in our own unique way. And so we kicked off the series with this big idea that I hope has given you freedom, has challenged you, has pushed you, has helped you see the opportunities and the challenges and the choices in your life differently over the last few weeks, is that Jesus actually gives you permission to play your unique part in his mission. And that's the big idea of this whole series, is that Jesus, the God of the universe, the one who knows you most and loves you best, has given you permission to play your unique part in his mission. That there's a mission God hopes happens in the world. There's a mission that Jesus came to the earth to begin and to see accomplished, but he didn't finish it. He actually says you and I are invited to play our part in continuing that story. And so hopefully, over the last couple of weeks, as we've talked about it, there's been something stirring in your heart, in your life, right? Of a vision that God has for your life, a vision for who God wants you to be, a vision that you have for your life. Because we all know it's one thing for God to have a vision, but until you and I get a glimpse of that vision, until you and I decide, hey, I'm running after something that might feel at first bigger than I know how to handle, bigger than I know how to achieve on my own. But if we don't grab a hold of that vision, we will never see it accomplished. And it has to be big enough and strong enough to pull us through whatever setbacks or struggles we will inevitably face in the process. Because you know this, if you've ever run after something important, building a business, starting a family, taking a step of faith, graduating from third grade, right? All of those things in your life that are important milestones, right? There's going to be bumps along the way. And the gravitational pull of our life never draws us towards vision. It always drags us towards comfort and complacency. And so the vision of our life has to be big enough to actually pull us past that. Because there's going to be some lag time always in your life between when you set out to accomplish something and when you see it happen. Because big vision is always accomplished by taking multiple, several successful steps in the right direction. That's what we're talking about today. And so Jesus knew this. He talked about this to his followers, right? As he invited people to become his apprentices, to live life and answer questions and pre-decide certain things the way Jesus would. He says in Luke 16:10, this incredible quick statement, but it's so, so powerful, especially for those of us that are trying to do important things in our life, right? He says, if you're faithful in the little things, then you will be faithful in large ones. But if you're dishonest in little things, or you cut corners, or you try to get there faster than you should, you won't be honest or honorable with great responsibilities. And it's this tension that Jesus points out to us, that so many of us, we think, once I get that bigger opportunity, once I get that promotion, once someone is following me, then I'll live this way. Then I'll be this kind of person. Once I get that raise, then I'll trust God with my money. Once I get here in my career, then I'll start to be able to look around to serve other people. But right now, I just got to take care of me, right? Once I'm popular, like in 5th grade, because I'm the big kid on campus, then I can watch out for the other kids, and then I'll be the friend that I know I should be. But for right now, I just got to put other people down to make sure I feel good about myself, right? Because have you been to elementary school, right? We all have these moments and these decisions and these things that we assume in our head, but yet Jesus says, actually, that's actually not true. That's not the case. That you will be who you are regardless of circumstances. And so if you are faithful in the little things, then when you're given bigger responsibilities, then you'll be faithful in those too. I mean, this is great parenting advice, right? Like when you have a young child, you trust them with a little bit, hey, let's cook mac and cheese together, and you can help measure the milk. We did this yesterday in our house, right? But I'm not going to let you turn on the stove and do your own thing and just unattended to, right? We might have a trip to the ER if that happened, right? But then eventually, you hope that they get to college and they can make mac and cheese for themselves, right? Right? You teach them to manage their time so that when they get a job and someone says, hey, you got to get this project done, they know how to kind of plot out their thing versus someone looking over their shoulder saying every step of the way, here's your job today. Right? When you step into moments of great responsibility, of great opportunity, you will actually demonstrate the habits that you've already learned in the growth process up till that point. And Jesus says this is true for all of us. This isn't a church person thing or a Christian thing or a religious thing. It is a human thing. And we've all had moments in our own life, and we've definitely seen it in the lives of others, where you're like, man, you missed the moment because you didn't practice when you could have because you thought it wasn't as important. Right? And Jesus says big things happen in small steps, so be faithful. Take care of those small things. So for you, for students that you just got into a new school year, maybe you went back to the same school but a new grade. Some of you, I know you went to a new school this last couple of weeks, and that has all kinds of feelings, right? There's some excitement, there's maybe some trepidation, which is an SAT word for fear. There's this sense of I got to make a name for myself, or I got to make a great first impression. But if you were to pause, and whether you're a couple days in or a week or two, or you start this coming week, right, depending on where you go, if you were to ask the question, at the end of this school year, in June 2025, who do I want to be? What do I want to be known for around campus? What do I hope is true about me in June? And you were to have that idea in mind for the entire school year, and you were to make small decisions, daily, weekly decisions towards that end. And things come and things change. There's all kinds of unpredictables that might show up in your life. But if you have that idea clearly in your head and your heart and your soul, my guess is you will have a much higher chance of becoming that person. And the same is true for those of you who are parents. What kind of parent do you want to be at the end of this school year? What kind of roommate do you want to be at the end of this school year? What kind of employee or employer do you want to be in June 2025? Or to even break it down smaller, at the end of this calendar year, what's something that you hope is true in your life, in your health, or in your finances, or in your most important relationships? What's something that's true about your faith 4 months from now that you can say, that's what I'm running after. And I have that thing really, really clear in my heart and in my soul and in my mind so I can make small steps towards that goal. Because for most of us, if we're honest, if what we wish were true about the spiritual life is that once we think it, we were there. Like we all have this idea of like a microwaved life and a microwave spirituality. But the truth is that all throughout the scriptures, this idea of spiritual growth, of transformation, of discipleship, whatever you want to call it, is often related to an agricultural metaphor. Because Jesus knew that things that matter grow and take time. The day you plant something isn't the day it shows up with fruit on it. Unless you go to Home Depot and buy an already full, grown tree and put that in your garden in the backyard and be like, ta-da, look what I did, right? It's like, yeah, you didn't really do much other than drive to Home Depot, which is great. But someone that plants a tree from a seed knows that takes time and patience and repeated steps of input and energy long before there's ever anything to show for it. And the same is true for your purpose and mine. So what is it that you see? What is the preferred future? Students, adults, parents, what's the preferred future that you see? And what is the step that you can take towards that future this week? What's something that it might not be the only step you take, it might not be only a step you take this week, you might take that step over and over and over again, but what is a small step in the right direction you can take towards that vision to be faithful in the small things, as Jesus said, so that you can see the dream that God has for you and who He has for you to become accomplished. Because here's the thing, if someone has to ask you to do the small things, you often won't be ready when the big moment comes. If someone has to repeatedly ask you to do the small things, you won't be ready when the opportunity, the big moment arrives. Like, I remember this coming into focus so clearly for me when I moved to college. That growing up, there was, we had 3 kids in our house, and as you kind of got older in our house, you had more and more chores. And so as the oldest, it was always unfair because I had the most. And it just didn't seem right that my brother got away with everything and didn't have to do anything because he was 5.5 years younger than me. And so at 16, I thought at 9, he should be able to do everything I have to do, but none of the privileges, right? I loved driving first and all that kind of stuff, right? But as my chores and abilities got bigger and bigger as I grew up, once I got to college, I recognized, my parents were training me in small steps over time to, cook for yourself, clean up after yourself, do your own laundry, separate your laundry so that everything you have isn't a nice pinkish gray, right? Like many freshmen that I know, right? And there's this moment where you kind of look back and go, oh, that's why those little small things that they had asked me to do were there, right? That's why they did that, because then when the big moment came and I moved away and was on my own and loved all the freedom, I wanted to have all those little inputs of investment to teach me the responsibility so that I actually could enjoy that freedom. And so the question is for you, right? Like, what commitments do you keep in your life? What spaces of growth, of consistency, of responsibility, ooh, there's that word, right? Are you good at keeping? My coach asked me this question this last week. What commitments do you consistently keep for yourself? What do you do for yourself? Not because you're going to get caught or not that even anyone's going to notice if you don't. Do you only do what is needed to not get in trouble? Or do you only do what's necessary because if you don't, you can avoid immediate natural consequences? Or is there a vision motivation for you that actually moves you to do things and to keep commitments to yourself because you believe that those are important, because God has given you a vision for your life, and you know big visions are accomplished by small, successful steps in the right direction. The Apostle Paul was an incredible leader in the first century after Jesus radically changed his life, and he went all around the Mediterranean rim of modern-day Europe and Africa to plant churches. And so he left the Middle East and goes all the way through, what is now Greece and Rome and Turkey, and even down to northern Africa. And all these little ecclesias, these little gatherings of followers of Jesus began popping up wherever Paul went. And then later in his life, when he was arrested and in prison, he knew he couldn't travel to those places, so he would write letters to them, encouraging them, coaching them, giving them insight and blessing and prayer. And most of those letters that he wrote from prison have become a good part of what we call the New Testament. Specifically, the book of Philippians, most scholars have come to learn and understand that this was probably one of the last letters he wrote when he knew his death and was imminent, being in prison for as long as he had. And yet, the amount of joy and encouragement that drips out of the words of the book of Philippians is incredible, because Paul understood the vision God has for his life. And so his circumstances, like we talked about last week, may not always impact that vision that God has for you, but the vision God has for you can always impact your circumstances. And so Paul's sitting in a pit prison, most likely chained to a Roman guard, losing a ton of freedom, having lost all autonomy, and yet he asks a friend, hey, would you write these words down and take them to this church in Philippi? And he starts off in Philippians chapter 1. If you want to turn there, you can grab a Bible. If not, the words will be up on the screen. But quickly, he just says, whenever I pray, which is crazy, right? To put yourself in that situation, what would you pray for, right? The Apostle Paul says, whenever I pray, I make my requests for all of you with joy. But when I pray in this really bummer of a circumstance, I actually have you on my mind. It says, for you have been my partners in spreading the good news about Christ from the time you first heard until now. And then he says this incredible line that I hope as we wrap up this series sticks with you no matter what season you find yourself in as you pursue what God has for you. And he says, and I am certain that God, who began that good work within you, will continue this work until it is finally finished on the day when Christ Jesus returns. I mean, that is such good news, right? Because if you feel behind, if you feel like, I should be farther than I am right now, if you feel like there's so much ground I have to make up, or I'm late to this following Jesus thing, or whatever it might be, that the work that God has started in you, God will be faithful to complete. That you have a part to play. You and I have a participation in our own transformation, but ultimately God is the one that's going to bring it to completion in his timing as we trust and follow Jesus, right? He continues down in verse 10, Paul says, for I want you to understand what really matters. And if anybody should know, he might be it. He's like, I've lost everything I thought mattered, and I've come to discover what actually really, really matters, right? I want you to understand, he writes to the Philippians, what really matters, so that you can live pure and full and blameless lives until the day of Christ's return. He says, may you always be filled with the fruit of your salvation. There's that metaphor again, right? The righteous character produced in your life by Christ Jesus, for this will bring much glory and praise to God. Paul uses this idea of fruit, this thing that our lives produce when we love and follow Jesus, because fruit, again, doesn't show up automatically, and it never shows up instantly. Right? This was long before canned goods existed, right? What Paul is saying is this thing in your life, you have to cultivate it like you would a fruit tree, like you would something in your garden. You have to take care to watch and invest and take the right steps each and every day so that the fruit of your salvation, this righteous character, right? Another word for that is integrity, that you are consistent in who you are, in your identity in God. You have pre-decided certain things that you're running after will show up in your life. That you've decided this is where I'm heading, this is the vision God has for me, and so no matter what anybody says, no matter if I get applause or not, no matter if it makes money today or not, right, I'm going to take these steps that might feel small, might even seem insignificant. I'm going to take these steps consistently in the right direction towards the vision that God has put forward in my life. The late Eugene Peterson, an incredible author and scholar of the Bible, writes that discipleship to Jesus can be simply summed up as a long obedience in the same direction. A long obedience in the same direction. And we don't like any of those words as Americans, right? It's going to take a long time. It's going to require obedience, and it's going to be in the same direction. Like, I thought this life with God was supposed to be an adventure. Oh, it'll take you places. It'll take you all kinds of adventurous places. But the direction towards Jesus, it's a long obedience in the same direction. So we have to make sure that our attention is focused on those things, no matter what happens and comes to distract us in our life. So to give you an idea of how this might work, I talked my son into being a sermon prop for me today, since kids are in the room. So Isaiah, you ready, bud? All right, so Isaiah loves to ride his scooter, right? So Isaiah loves to ride his scooter, and he's getting pretty good at it. And we rode from our house to Chipotle the other day without any concerns, which was great. So come on over here, bud, once you get your helmet on. You got it? No. Okay, perfect. Let me help you. Somebody tightened it up real. That was probably a brother or a sister, probably, huh? All right, there we go. Look up. There we go. The worst thing is when you put a helmet on and pinch that skin. That's the worst. All right, we didn't do that. Perfect. All right, here we go. So Isaiah, you're gonna be right here, and you're gonna ride towards this cone. Okay? But, babe, would you stand over here? You're gonna look at mom the whole time. Okay? So don't take your eyes off mom, but try to ride towards that cone. Ready? Do you want us to cheer you on? Let's count them down. Ready? 3, 2, 1, go! You're supposed to go towards the cone. You want to try again? Why don't you try one more time? Try one more time. Again, that was great. Keep your eyes on mom, but you got to ride towards that orange cone right there, okay? Turn around. You're not going to get there that way. Perfect. All right. Keep looking at mom. Don't take your eyes off mom, but get to that orange cone. Okay, would you get there, please? Here we go. No, you're cheating. So, good job, buddy. Give it up for Isaiah. Yeah. Great job, bud. So, you learn, right, that when you're supposed to go somewhere, but if your eyes are on something else, you're going to go where your eyes are taking you. Right? The thing that you and I focus on in our life, right? And we know this is true. It's fun when it's a scooter. Don't do it when you're driving, right? I've had this moment where you're talking to your kids in the backseat trying to hand them chicken nuggets or whatever, and all of a sudden you feel the bumps because you're kind of swerving in the lane. Don't do that. Hypothetical situation, right? But we have these moments in our life. Physically, we know this is real. We know that happens. That when you take your eyes off of where you're supposed to go, you go where you're looking. But the same is true with your soul. And that's often harder to catch. It's often harder to notice in the moment. And even when we feel, right, those little bumps in our life, we don't assume it's because we're watching the wrong thing or looking in the wrong direction. We just think that's part of it. But this is what's so incredibly important, is that in your life, in your spiritual life, in your financial life, in your relational life, your attention, not your intention, determines your direction. Your attention, what you are focusing on, where you are claiming you want to go, whatever you send yourself in that attention's direction is where you will head up, regardless of where you hope to end up. So when you think back to that question, students, of who do you want to be at the end of this school year? Parents, who do you want to be at the end of this school year? At the end of this calendar year, this week, in that important relationship, again, or in your faith, with that new opportunity for work, with your finances, whatever area it is that you're thinking about in your life, your attention, not your intention, will always be the thing that decides where you're heading. This is so easy to notice in other people. It's so difficult to notice in the mirror, right? You can see it in your kids. You can see it in that coworker that drives you nuts. You can see it in your neighbor, right? You can see it in your partner or spouse sometimes, right? Where you're like, you just got to actually do something. You can't just say you want to, right? But it's so difficult to notice it in our own life and our own story. And yet, like I said, we play a role in our own transformation by taking small, successful steps in the right direction. And in a world where we have so many options, so many opinions, so much noise, so many distractions, it is so difficult at times to keep our eyes focused on the thing that we have pre-decided is where we need to go. That's where God has sent us, or that's what God has spoken to us, or that is the vision that you just have for your life, even if you're not sure about the God part yet. What's the vision you have for your life? Are you taking steps towards that? And is that the filter that you assess all of those opportunities and opinions through? It's the difference between Cheesecake Factory and Ruth's Chris, right? Both fine restaurant establishments, neither paid for this, spot and free advertisement that I'm giving them right now, right? But both great restaurants. But the menu at Cheesecake Factory is a literal chaptered book, right? And everything they have is about mid, right? They have a lot, but it's all like fine. Like nothing's gonna be like amazing, but it gets the job done, right? But if you want a great steak, Ruth's Chris is near the top of most people's list because they do one thing. Now, someone's going to argue, well, they have a porterhouse and they have a ribeye and a New York strip and a flaming. You're right. They do multiple versions of one thing, and they do all of them really, really well. And you go to Cheesecake Factory, and it's ornate in so many things because they want to overwhelm you with the opulence of options. You go to Ruth's Chris, they tell you don't touch the plate because it's hot, and it comes out, and there's a piece of meat on the plate, standing proud by itself. And if you're a vegetarian, this analogy isn't working for you. But for the rest of us, right, and that's going to be one of the best steaks you've ever had. And I think for many of us, if we really want to see the vision that God has given to us in our life, we have to decide we're going to be Ruth's Chris. We're going to be the kind of people that say no to a lot of options so we can say yes to the very best. And that doesn't mean that you aren't generous with your time or generous with other things, but that you keep a very clear focus on the thing that only you can do in whatever season you find yourself in. That you and I, in whatever season we're in, there are often only a few things in our life that make massive differences in our story. That our trajectory is often set by a few, not always simple, but few singular decisions that we might make over and over and over and over again. And so I don't know what that is for you. I don't know what season you find yourself in. Maybe it's in a season of confusion. Maybe you have a new opportunity because you lost your previous opportunity for work. And so while you're excited because you didn't really love that job, you feel a little stuck. Maybe it's a space of relational confusion, right? Where maybe you're in a new relationship and you're hoping it's not like the last ones. Or maybe you just felt stuck in your long-term relationship and trying to figure out, how do I make this marriage better? Maybe it's a new school year. You moved up to middle school, you moved up to high school, and now there's all different kinds of pressures, a lot more opinions and noise. And how do you keep becoming the young man or the young woman that God's invited you to be in that new space? And I think what's incredibly helpful about what Paul said to the Philippians, and I believe he wants to say to us as well, is while fruit takes a long time to grow, how fruit grows often is quite simple. It's not easy, but it's quite simple. And so whether you're a student, a parent, a single adult, or a senior adult, whatever season you're in, it actually boils down to one simple question that helps direct our life in some really powerful ways. And elementary school students, you've been learning about this idea all month long, but I'll just close with this statement, right? That no matter what season you're going through, you'll never regret asking, what's the wise thing to do? No matter what season you're going through, you'll never regret asking, what's the wise thing to do? Who do I want to become? Well, what's the wise thing to do to get there? What do I want to see God do in my life this year? Well, what's the wise thing to do towards that end? Where do I want to be financially? Well, what's the wise thing to do today towards that goal? Who do I want to be in terms of relational integrity or in how I'm dating or how I'm engaging with my spouse? Like what's the wise thing to do today towards that goal? What do I want to do with my health? How do I want to experience this life in my body? What's the wise thing to do? Now, wise doesn't always mean what's most comfortable, convenient, or what just avoids stress or preserves the illusion of safety, right? That's not what wisdom actually is. Sometimes what's wise means, hey, this is the time to take that risk. Hey, what's wise? This is the time to actually stretch in that space with your faith or your finances or in that relationship and have that hard conversation, right? Whatever it might be, you will never regret, no matter what season you're going through, asking, what's the wise thing to do? Not what do I want to do, but what's the wise thing to do? And I believe that as we continue to love and follow Jesus, wherever you're at on the spiritual spectrum, the more and more we ask what's the wise thing to do and do it, the more and more we will crave and desire wisdom, right? Just as our elementary school students have been learning all month long. The more you participate in wisdom, the more you desire wisdom because you experience the benefits, because it takes time for the fruit of integrity to grow in your life. So who do you want to become? Who do you want to become by the end of this school year? Who do you want to become before you have to set New Year's resolutions on January 1st? Who do you want to become by the end of September? What do you hope is true about you this week? And what step will you take today or tomorrow to make that desire a reality? See, I think so many of the things that we do on a regular basis, especially when it comes to faith, we can think, oh, that's just how we get stuff done, right? Like, oh, join a serving team because they need help, right? Or join a life group because it helps the numbers fill up, or you should give so we can keep the lights and the air conditioning on. And while all of those things have utility to them, actually all of those things, they aren't just tasks, they're practices. They're how we build a habit of doing small, successful steps in the right direction over and over again to become the person that God has invited all of us to be. That we don't want you to join a serving team just because we need help. We want you to join a serving team because I've never met a single person that goes, you know what I want to be known for? Being extraordinarily selfish. I would just love to be known for being a total selfish person. No, none of us want that. So serving is one of the ways you actually practice becoming who we want to be. God doesn't want any of us to feel alone or isolated. And so a life group is why it's important, because when you get connected in community and you can take the mask down, and it's not just saying, hey, how are you? Fine, I'm good, right? But you actually get in life with people, something changes in your spiritual journey because now you feel trusted and you feel seen, which is scary at first, but those two things lead to feeling known, which is the most important thing to our human soul. So that step of being in consistent community, I know it's not always convenient. We have 3 kids too, but that is a practice that when you set aside and say, we're going to do this regularly, you'll look back and go, oh, that has produced spiritual fruit in my life. When you trust God with your finances, it's not to pay the bills or to pay off some sense of guilt for being in church and, compared to what you did later this weekend. Like, that's not the goal, right? The goal is that none of us want to be selfish. And when we trust God with our finances and we say, this is enough to be a little bit of a sacrifice, I'm going to feel it, but it's not enough that it's going to harm my family, and we do that consistently over and over and over again, it builds us into the type of person that not only God dreams for us to become, but ultimately that you want to be. So again, at first it feels hard. It feels like it's not much, but these are the steps this is what the church is here for, is to create those steps for you to take so that this part of your life, your soul, that is the hardest place to notice growth and the hardest place to notice when it's atrophying, so that you can consistently over and over again take small steps in the right direction so you get to where you want to go. So you become who God's created you to be. And so in a moment, we're going to do something that we do every time, and that is receive an offering. And we say that this is an act of worship because it actually is. That's why it's an act of worship, is because this is a way that for those of us that give around here, we say, I'm becoming more of who God's created me to be. I'm demonstrating trust in the area of my life that might be the hardest for me to live open-handedly. And so if you're here for the first time or you're tuning in for the first time online, please don't feel any obligation to give. We are just so glad that you're here. This isn't necessarily for you, but for those of us that have decided to love and follow Jesus and have said, Restoration Church is my home and has blessed and benefited my life or my family, and I want to become a less selfish person, then I want to step into a practice of generosity. Because there's always something else that will be yelling for your money. There's always something else that will be yelling for my time. There's always something else that will be yelling for my attention. But my attention determines my direction, not my intention. So you can't hope or desire your way to become a generous person. You have to start by being faithful in the small things, when it's just a couple dollars, when it's just, once a week, and you kind of build that habit. I love this last week. We get our kind of monthly giving report, and we had 2 new givers for the first time at Restoration Church that were in middle school and high school. And I celebrate that not because the amount that they gave is going to turn the needle for our church. It's like, whew, we're good now. That middle schooler tithed off his 1 hour a week job, right? No, it's because he's practicing in the small things. And I remember when I was in middle school and I got my first $5 for mowing my neighbor's lawn, and my parents said, hey, I think now's a good time to begin this practice, to save a little, to give a little, and to live off less than what you got. Because that practice, when it was $5, laid the foundation to get our family through the last 20 years of our life. It has paid massive dividends in our story. Not necessarily dollar dividends, but integrity dividends, peace dividends, hope dividends, and growth dividends. And so I celebrate that because it's not about the amount. Whether it's $5 or $50,000, it's actually never about the amount. It's about seeing people take the steps to trust God in an area of their life that is often so hard for us to let go of. Where they say scarcity and fear is not where I'm going, but I can actually trust and rest that whatever I have is a gift from God, and when I give it to him and say thank you as an act of gratitude, I trust that he's got me. And that's what's the fruit of giving. And so, again, if you're here for the first time, please don't feel any obligation to participate. We're just so glad you're here. But if this is your church home and you've decided to love and follow Jesus, I would love to encourage you to take a step towards growing your generosity as a way to become the person that God dreams for you to be and the person that you ultimately want to be yourself. So we try to make doing something really hard, really easy around here. There's 3 ways you can give. You can go to restorationchurchsd.com/give. Those of you watching online, you can open up another tab, do it right now. You can set up one-time or reoccurring giving there. That's how my family and I choose to do it. You can give in the kiosks and the boxes on the way out by either door, or you can text any amount to the number 84321, or while you have your phone, you can just scan the QR code on the screen. That'll fast track you there. But however it is that you choose to give, we just want to say thank you. We're proud of you. It sounds weird to say, but it's true, because that's a big spiritual step to begin to trust God with our finances in a way we know can be difficult, but I promise you, grows you and leads you to fulfilling your purpose. So as we give, why don't we stand if you're able. We're going to sing a couple more songs as we close out our worship experience together, just to really lead us into this posture of a space of trust. Because ultimately, we have to trust that God has us if we're going to take these steps, because it won't be easy, and they're often too big for us to do on our own. And that's the best news of all, is that you're never actually alone as you pursue your purpose. God is always with you, and we can lean and trust and depend on him to complete the good work that he started in your life.